Come on, BJ, this is stupid.
No, Hang on. This is United World Navy Hospital Ship Revival en route to Pluto. Status normal, ETA and trajectory unchanged. Repeat, this is UNHS Revival bound for Pluto. Status normal. Next report in 24 hours. Over.
Relay station to Revival. Copy. Over.
No, it's not stupid. We've got another month at least before we reach Pluto. And it's going to get really dull in here, especially with only 2 people on any given shift, until we get to the station in Charon. 13-hour shifts with only about an hour of work makes for major boredom. Come on, Persis, live a little. Besides, we're headed for a cholera outbreak on Pluto. By the time we start rolling out our relief efforts, there won't be any time for fun. So why not have it now?
Okay, but how can we tell campfire stories with no camp and no fire?
Oh yeah? Check this out. Execute ambient protocol VJ Epsilon. See? Instant campfire. We're transported to Boy Scout camp using the magic of technology.
I was never a Boy Scout, obviously. But, you know what? Fine. Have your fun. We'll tell campfire stories. I assume you've got one in the chamber ready to pop off?
As a matter of fact, I do. This is a story about something that happened to my granddad. I come from a long line of nurses. Granddad served as a nurse in the presidential sick bay during the Lindstrom administration. He was the last Earth-born nurse to serve after they moved the White House brick by brick and recreated it in the federal district's Terra Farm on Mars. Just imagine it, a shimmering beacon on a strange new world, repurposed to support mankind. It had been burnt to the ground by British forces during the American Revolution and built up again, better than before. Then it was renovated throughout multiple presidencies, and now its old bones hold in an almost completely new structure. The White House on Mars has 138 rooms, 35 bathrooms, and 6 levels in the residence. There are 412 doors, 84 windows, 28 fireplaces, 8 staircases, and 7 elevators. Each room has its own story. And some say that the spirits of the past live in each brick and beam in it. Bricks filled with stories, tragedies, secrets. Bricks soaked in blood. For hundreds of years, people have claimed it to be haunted. Presidents, first ladies, and staff have experienced cold drafts, ghostly entities, the whole 9 yards. My granddad was among them. They just arrived back from the presidential tour of one of the outer colonies. Granddad was on a crew breaking down and setting up gear. They were a well-oiled machine and got the job done with military precision. Impeccable, as you might imagine. They'd just completed a 19-hour shift, and Granddad was fall down tired. He used to say that his ass was dragging so much it was wiping out his footprints.
I have no idea what that means.
It means he was tired. Just go with it. Granddad had unpacked his go bag and was ready for some rack time. 1:38 a.m. Not quite the witching hour, especially when you take into account Martian days are not quite the same length as Earth days. But it was quiet enough. Granddad walked down the colonnade towards the east wing, made his way past the Vermeil room, the library. Then he reached the east garden room. But as soon as he arrived, he didn't know why he wanted to be in the room he was in. As if he was compelled to go there, like a sleepwalker. He didn't feel alone He wasn't alone. But he was the only living soul in the East Wing. It's hard to be alone in the White House, but Granddad said that even when you are, you aren't. Not really. Heavy footsteps and a cool breeze followed him down the colonnade. He stopped, and the breeze and the steps stopped with him. He continued on, and it followed. The echoes made it seem like steps were coming from the theater. No one. He looked out into the garden. When the mind is confused, when it can't explain what's happening, it looks in odd places for the answers. There was no one in the garden. Then, just above his left shoulder, there was an orb of light. Like a lens flare you get when photographing a bright object. It was in his periphery, just over his shoulder. He said he had no way of describing the feeling that little ball of light gave him. Chills ran down his body and back up again, freezing bone, muscle, nerve, and mind. It wasn't until later that he realized that this had happened to others, many others. For decades, centuries, people have felt the presence of this man walking down the halls with them when they felt the most alone. The footsteps of the 16th president walk with them. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt used the Lincoln bedroom as her study, and she said she felt his presence, Lincoln's presence, whenever she worked there late at night. Winston Churchill told a story of emerging naked from his evening bath smoking his cigar, only to find Lincoln sitting by the fireplace in his room. Kinda feel sorry for old Honest Abe, am I right? So, what'd you think, Persis? Scary? Not scary? Intriguing? Profound?
Not bad, Space Cowboy. Not bad. But I've got a better one. And this is a proper campfire story. I grew up in Tycho City, which is still probably the biggest domed city on the moon. The closest I ever got to the woods was a block of City Park or maybe some hanging gardens. So I was always jealous of the families who went camping and hiking. I went to college on Mars. The campus was about an hour or two away from a bunch of terra farms that had been converted to national forests. During my sophomore year in college, a bunch of students in my sociology class decided to make the most of the upcoming Indigenous Peoples holiday weekend and spend a few nights up near Lake Cassini. I didn't even need to know the details. I was there for it. One thing that's interesting about Lake Cassini National Forest is that many of the trees were transplanted from forest on Earth. It took nearly 75 years to do it and was a true marvel of modern engineering. When they first terraformed Mars and dug Lake Cassini, at least 50% of the flora originated on Earth. Even stocked the lake with earth trout. But it came with a cost. The process of preserving the trees for their voyage into space was risky. Many of the chemicals used were toxic. There was an accident, chemical spill, on a mountain in New Hampshire where they were prepping several acres of timber for transplant. Dozens of men who were hiking through some rough country hoping to avoid the spill died at the feet of the very trees that would be planted decades later on Mars. Anyway, I packed a backpack, I packed hiking clothes, I packed a compass, a sleeping bag, a fire starter, all the necessities to make s'mores. Basically everything someone who has never been camping thinks you need to go camping. So when we arrived at the campsite, I quickly realized that I may have been misled by the charming REI commercials and LL Bean catalogs my whole life, and was now in a real forest in October and woefully unprepared. No problem. I'd been a Girl Scout for a few weeks back in 3rd grade. I was scrappy, I was clever, I could fake it, if nothing else. As soon as people began setting up the site, I partnered up with the few in charge of the fire because I wanted and needed to be near whatever source of warmth we mustered up ASAP, and probably permanently. Luckily, I had actually learned how to build a fire somewhere along the line, so I was at least marginally helpful in creating not one, but 3 separate fires around the site in the designated rock circle fire pits. And not a moment too soon either, because something else I learned too quickly on this maiden campover was that when the sun sets on Mars, under a canopy of trees in October, it leaves you unmercifully in the dark and in the cold. The bright 60-degree day was gone, leaving its windy 30-degree evil cousin in its wake. After a super authentic camp dinner of leftover pizza reheated amidst the amber flames, I was ready to call it a night. Unfortunately, according to our comlinks, it was barely 8 o'clock. We had hours to kill, hopefully not literally before it was socially acceptable, even in the woods, to hunker down for some sleep. We all organically split off into 3 groups, 1 per fire. One bunch playing card games, another playing guitar and singing a few songs, and the third to tell spooky stories. I ended up at the ghost story campfire. I heard stories about well-known ghost hitchhikers, the little girl ghost in the basement that were never actually little girls, and then the stories grew to be more mature, more local, more real as several around the fire shared the allegedly true accounts of just how many hikers had mysteriously gone missing in and around Lake Cassini over the years. All experienced, well-prepared hikers every year just disappeared. Many never found, and those that were found were so impossibly off course, nothing natural could explain it. When this line of accounts ended, some were skeptical, others were convinced, but all were a little creeped out. When the pause in the storytelling stretched longer than any silence allowed in the dark, someone urged a friend to tell their own story. This kid in our group, Tim, had a personal paranormal experience hiking through MARINER'S Notch about a mile from the north shore of the lake. As eager as his friend was to volunteer him for the story, Tim casually passed, saying it wasn't a good story. No one needed to hear it. But left without anything else to do, the circle collectively pleaded with him to tell it, and so he eventually obliged. Tim's story began with a hike he and his father had taken 5 winters ago. He detailed how it was an unseasonably warm day, and that despite having been the snowiest November and December in the history of terraformed Mars, there were parts of the pass that had melted clean to the red rock face, making the trek far less snowy and icy than they had feared it might be. He also made a note that with the snow that did remain and the solar glare in the open passes, it became difficult to see the yellow markers that blazed the trail, and he and his father had to travel much slower and more cautiously than they would have otherwise. Eventually, they came to a clearing of granite that overlooked the notch, and they were uncertain which way the trail should go from that point. They tried to follow any packed ground, but nothing was discernibly more well-traveled than any other direction, and the maps were of little help in trying to pinpoint their location. Using their compass and the setting sun to determine their next steps, they stopped off heading northeasterly until realizing they were quickly gaining elevation instead of losing it. Frustrated and growing increasingly panicked as the sun began to set, they decided to create their own path, so long as it set them down the side of the notch and not any farther up. Their rationale was that, the worst case, they'd meet up with the Nerio River and could follow that until they met a road or other landmark. They stuck to their plan, and about 45 minutes into their unmarked return, they started to hear branches cracking nearby and froze. No animals could be seen. No snow was falling off of trees, but when they stopped, the sound did too. And unnervingly, when they started walking, the sound would start up too. Neither of them spoke of the sound, neither of them wanting to acknowledge what it could be, and so they silently continued their descent, as swiftly and as safely as they could manage. The sound became their constant, and no longer seemed intimidating or unwelcome. It was just the score to their trip. With both of their eyes set ahead and their paces quick and measured, they almost didn't notice the young man who had appeared beside them, keeping right in the same step. Tim looked to his father, and his father back to him, but still, no one spoke. Their newly found trailmate didn't make eye contact, didn't attempt to strike up a conversation. He just hiked as deliberately as they did. Nothing untoward about his presence, well, other than his actual presence. Tim said that this hiker was always shrouded in shadow, so you can never make out his facial features. But he was wearing an antique uniform from what would eventually become the United World Space Navy's Corps of Engineers, probably sometime in the late 2080s. Their uniforms were distinctive for the orange band lily insignia worn over the heart. Tim said that the band lily on his chest stood out in the darkness. When they finally leveled out along the bank where the Nerio River met Lake Cassini, Tim and his father wanted to sigh in relief, but the first sigh came from the mouth of their companion. He placed his hand over his heart and then saluted them. He began walking along the river's edge until he disappeared. Not into the distance. Disappeared. No more than 5 steps away from them. They eventually found the way back to the trailhead lot where they had begun their day. They spoke to a park ranger the next morning, and the ranger said that they weren't the first to report sightings of a ghost hiker. He told them that it might have been a lucky omen because there had been a rock slide near MARINER'S Notch not far from where they'd been hiking. Several campers in the area were missing and suspected to have been killed by the rock slide. Maybe the ghost steered you away from it, the ranger had said. I couldn't speak. Most people couldn't speak. Thankfully, a girl sitting near me eventually did speak up. Tim, the hiker, that day? A nod from Tim, calm, collected, patiently waiting for her to continue her thought. But when she didn't, he rolled his eyes and spoke in an annoyed tone. Yeah, I know. He's standing, 5 steps behind me right now? Same uniform with the orange band lily? He does that every time I tell the story. That's why I don't like doing it.
Well, that was a great one. I knew you had it in you.
Well, since you'd gone to the trouble of... Hey, what's that on the monitor? There aren't any asteroids cataloged out here, are there?
Whatever it is, it's big. At least the size of this ship. Mapping its trajectory. It came from the far side of Pluto. One of the Kuiper Belt shipping lanes. Why didn't one of the stations on Charon alert us?
VJ, is that a house? Floating in space?
Yeah. Does it remind you of a
haunted mansion?
It's broadcasting some kind of signal.
Let's hear it.
Ooh, I've been dying to try this place.
Oh my god, me too. I've heard such good things about it.
Welcome to the Crime Diner. I'm Cindy. I'll be cooking for you this evening. Here are your menus.
Oh, what are you thinking about getting?
I don't know, murder with a side of cannibalism? What about you?
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm torn between historical mayhem and the social injustice, maybe?
Oh.
I just want to let you know that each episode comes with dinner, dessert, and a specialty drink chosen by yours truly.
Wine Dine and Storytime has had a makeover, and we invite you to slide into the booth with us at the Crime Diner, where each week we will discuss a crime over dinner, drinks, and dessert. See you there.
Hey, Freaky friends! It's Michelle and Melissa from the Freaky Fridays podcast. We are sisters in separate states and love to talk about all kinds of spooky, freaky, and scary shit while drinking and laughing through our fear.
Join us Fridays as we delve into everything from the world of the paranormal to scary movies to creepy stuff we find around the internet. Subscribe to Freaky Fridays wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Sleep tight.
Make sure you leave the lights on.
Freaky Fridays is a proud member of the Podmoth Network. For more awesome pods, check out podmoth.network.
Hello, twisted humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cults, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. We're bringing the most intense stories that'll keep you up at night. He was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter and felonious assault, but he was only sentenced to 5 months of probation, and this would be the last time that anyone ever saw Fiona. There are allegedly 2 women who also drowned in the first-class pool.
Was this the same glowing green that they'd seen in the darkness the night before?
He had refused to sit near the wagon cloth because of stains on it, which were most likely blood. Join us every Tuesday for a glass of wine or sangria and a dose of true crime. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sierra, and this is
Twisted and Uncorked.
I'm Edward October. For more true-ish, and classic tales of horror and the paranormal, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to ring the bell so you don't miss anything. Or find all of our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.